So I just want to do a quick update on the Grenfell Tower. There seems to be a lot of anger headed towards the judge, or the former judge, Sir Martin Moore-Bick. It's a bit unwarranted. People don't understand his role and what he can and can't actually do within his remit. I just want to go through 3 clips with you, just to reinforce the points I made before in my David Lammy video in relation to the inquiry is destined not to get the results that the people require, especially in a timely manner. So there's one video in relation to that. There's another clip which is a person who attended the video, the session, the public session or public audience, you could say, with the judge, Sir Martin Moore-Bick. And then the last one is another clip I managed to get from Nick Ferrari in the morning LBC. I was lucky just to be at my computer able to record it, but it's basically a solicitor who was involved in the Lacknell fire, which happened in 2009. Similar issue with the flammability of the materials used on the outside of the building. And after that particular fire, recommendations are made to the government, and this lady highlights the fact that this inquiry is not going to do anything, and we need to look at the government, or the people who get these recommendations and sat on them for 8 years. And if they sit on these recommendations for 8 years, then they have to answer for that. So we're going to go through these three clips, and we're going to have a little listen, and then at the end I'll chime in again and tell you what.
Well, meant to, will do. I mean, I can't do more than assure you that I know what it is to be impartial. I've been a judge for 20 years, and I give you my word that I will look into this matter to the very best of my ability and find the facts as I see them from the evidence. That's my job, that's my training, and that's what I intend to do. Now, if I can't satisfy you because you have some preconception about me as a person, that's up to you. But I'm telling you, well, I'm not getting personal. Yeah, but you don't respect me because you say the government has appointed me to do a hatchet job.
Not a hatchet job, you're going to do a Taylor report like for Hillsborough, which was very technical but didn't deal with the wider issues, and it took 30 years for people to be arrested.
This is why it's so important to get the terms of reference right, and for you to tell me what you think it should cover.
We did, and then you dismissed them on TV.
I think you misremembered what I said.
I'll find the clip.
Guys, we have got 2 ladies waiting.
Thank you.
Questions have been waiting ages.
So before we move on to...
You can see how David Lammy and his personal attack upon the head of the inquiry has had an effect now. The people are calling him out as some sort of government shill or some sort of government hack just to bury this into the sand. And how that's obviously put the judge, you can see, he's being quite defensive here, and he takes quite offence. And I highlighted this in my David Lammy video I did previously, that you can't attack a judge who served all his life as a judge. He knows what it is to be impartial. He said that himself. He knows what it is. You know, don't question the integrity of a man who's how dare you question the integrity of a man who's up there, you know, in good faith to try and head the inquiry, and you know, but making baseless accusations against him. And again, I come back to David Lammy's point. I think he's sown the seeds for this now. He's a white man. He's not an ethnic minority. He's not a woman. But he's, you know, I mean, I don't know. Is he competent? Ask yourself, if he's competent, is he any more or less competent than anyone else? You know, I think he's competent as far as I'm concerned. So if he starts underperforming, then you can take up that as an issue. But he hasn't even had a chance to underperform. You know, you're throwing stereotypes at him and throwing your own prejudices at him. Let's leave them out until he starts making catastrophic errors. You can't just accuse him of these things.
Yeah, good morning. I think it was a mixed bag, really. There were a lot of questions that were asked that couldn't be answered, and it wasn't the judge's fault. It's because the level of representation that was there was inadequate. So, for instance, we had someone from Public Health England telling us about air quality, but we didn't have anybody from the fire service telling us about building safety.
Right.
So when there were questions being asked, not all of them could be answered. Now, I know that I've spoken to the BBC about this and other news outlets, and it's being sort of portrayed that the heated sentiment was aimed at the judge, and it wasn't really. I mean, some of it was.
Right.
You know, there were questions levelled at his integrity, whether he would actually do a hatchet job for the government.
Yes, we heard that.
And that was made clear. What I personally took from it was, what he said was, he can only do the job he's been given, and he knows what it means to be impartial, and we have to take that. You know, he can only do what he can do, and he encouraged us actually to offer any information that we feel is pertinent to the investigation. But I think certainly the judge gave a good account of himself, but people are understandably angry, but it's mainly because questions that are being asked couldn't be answered because the team that was there to do so wasn't sufficient.
Well, that's very unimpressive, and that should have been sorted.
You can't make it as far-reaching as some people would like.
Yeah,
but it will still be wider than some people think. So he actually gave that the example of, you know, he wouldn't be able to look into social housing policy in general because that has implications far wider than he'd ever have the time to investigate. But he will be looking into something that I don't think people thought he would, which is the decisions and the correspondence trail that led into the contracts that were awarded, and the people that were involved in the decisions that led into the project management.
Roughly how many people were there, would you say?
Probably about 100.
And broadly speaking, at the end, the mood of the room, how would you sum it up?
I would say that people were quite fed up by the end, but as I say, it was more to do with the fact that the questions that they had couldn't be answered, and those were the questions around safety.
Yes, but has he headed off this suggestion that he should quit or he should resign, do you think? Or is that still out there?
I think he gave a good account of himself to the people in the room, certainly. I mean, obviously, that would maybe a few people require a bit more convincing, but as one of the people that was in that room, I don't feel as maybe negative towards him as I initially did, having not met him.
Fascinating speaking with you, Melvin. Do please stay in touch. I'd like to speak with you if you're prepared to over the coming days and weeks as the inquiry grinds into.
Okay, so you can see from that, a lot of the frustration in the room was because they couldn't get questions answered by relevant departments because they weren't there. Now, I would like just to quickly bring in, if you ever look at an American congressional hearing, I forget the guy's name, but there's a guy in there who's a very, very good prosecutor. And if you start a court up, you don't have it so that a load of people turn up on one side and essentially the mob of people are in the same room on the other. And then you just get this, it's going to inevitably be extremely confrontational and frustrating, as I think you'll agree you can see from that small mobile phone clip of what's happening. What happens in a court setting is someone prosecutes. Is it Comey? No, not Comey. It's an American prosecutor. He's very good. He's got like short grey hair and a shiny face. But anyway, you don't have it so you have like a panel. The court pulls in someone specifically. All right, in the Comey case. So let's speak to Comey about what he knows about Russian hacking. Comey, get your ass in here, get sworn in under testimony, and now the prosecutor's going to ask you a load of questions. And when I'm done with you, I'll tell you to leave. And then, let's relate it back to Grenfell. All right, now let's get the head of the fire department. Let's get him in, swear him under testimony. What did you think about Grenfell? What do you think about that? Well, you said you had reservations on TV about this tower for a long time. Please explain that to me. And then that person's done. And they have to, obviously, they're sworn in, and then you just dismiss them, or dismiss them if you want them to come back, then they can come back in. And then the next person comes in. All right, the head of the council, get that guy in and say, hey, what was going on here? Why did you award that contract? What happened here? What happened there? What was your response? Why didn't you respond to this disaster quick enough? You know, all these questions. The way that it is at the moment, you can see it's nothing. It's got no force of law at all. It's just a damage mitigation, a hazard, what they call it, a crisis management for a company. Okay, so imagine Coca-Cola gave out a load of poisonous Coca-Colas, yeah? Then, you're asking, Coca-Cola sends their head ex-chief executive down to speak to you and hold an inquiry. That's what's happening, all right? Can you see how stupid that is, asking the Coca-Cola to provide their own investigative body to have an audience with people and we can all shout at this ex-chief executive who knows all about Coca-Cola? It's like, hey, this is why it's so stupid. You're asking the government to hold the government to account. It's asking Coca-Cola to hold Coca-Cola to account. You're asking McDonald's to hold McDonald's to account. I don't know how many times I can emphasise how stupid this is. It's a waste of time. Until you take it out of their remit, which is what I highlighted on Nigel Farage's show. Traditionally, it was done via a court of record and a common law jury. Obviously, common law juries are not accessible anymore because obviously the government's done away with them. So unless you do it yourself, like you stand up and you actually create your own common law trial by jury, grand jury, and you have them properly sworn in as traditionally was the case, or you just bring your own, someone who is a prosecutor needs to come out there and actually hold court and then issue subpoenas and get these people in and investigate it based on what information they can have from the various parties. And that's basically what I'm getting at. This whole thing is a waste of time, in my opinion.
These things come as a result of public inquiries. You must be aware of that.
There are other organisations that can investigate instead of a public inquiry. The public inquiry is not the only route to carry out different investigations. There are other bodies involved, and they could, in certain circumstances, take over and look at certain issues. Similar here, there are different organisations here that can look at fire risk assessment. The council has their internal investigations. All of that should now be activated. We shouldn't be waiting for a public inquiry to be looking at all these things.
But not doubting your prowess in what you did back in 2000, or after the fire in 2009, I should say, but there was nothing that came out of that prevented what we saw at Grenfell Tower last month.
But then you don't need to look at the government. Once the recommendations have been made to the government, if the government don't take it on board after 8 years, you need to look at them to say, why didn't you do this?
I think we're just always going to... I think we'd have to agree to disagree on this one, because you don't think that something such as this inquiry will carry more weight and hopefully will bring about better safety far more than a series of inquests would.
Well, let's wait to see that, Nick, because from what I can see now, I don't think that will ever happen. But I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. All I can say is it's unlikely to happen, very unlikely.
Well, I'm sure you and I both want the safety of whichever way it happens, whether it does come through inquests or inquiries or whatever it might be. Sophie Khan, thank you, your solicitor who worked on the Lacanal house fire, which was back in 2009. Peter's in West Hampstead.
Now, this lady was a solicitor who was actually involved in the Lacanal fire investigation. And, so she basically is aware that she made recommendations to the government. And the government, obviously, you can take the advice, you cannot take the advice. If you take the advice, good on you. If you don't take the advice, then you have a problem when another event happens, like Grenfell. So you were given the advice from a professional in good faith that these things need to change, and yet 8 years later nothing has changed, and now we have a disaster where many more people have died. Okay, so there's the case. So once bitten, twice shy. Essentially, you've been bitten once with an accident. It was highlighted in Lacanal that these panels and plastic components are burning quite freely. And now you've gone on and you've clad everything else in this massive tower, and you've decided to, well, what's the likelihood of it really having a fire? It's cheap and cheerful. Put them up, make it look pretty. All these vain, it's vanity. Putting plastic panels that are cheap as chips around a ugly high-rise, it's vanity. Also, it comes into greed as well, because you're using the cheapest possible crap ever. So there's two very, very immoral motivations there to clean up the look of this building, and at the cost of a huge fire risk. You're ignoring previous advice and you're doing it anyway. So this is a very important point what the solicitor said. She says you got to look at the government, you got to see who didn't make the decisions, who's being complicit in this fire. The chain of liability goes up and up and up.